changing directions. You may be better off by waiting, or you may not be. Just really depends on the marketplace and circumstances of the given year. And we're going to talk a little bit about market sectors and their dynamics. I know it sounds kind of dry, but we're going to try and spice it up a little bit for you to make sure that we aren't boring you to tears. And we're also going to talk about tracking the price of your home that you're going to be selling between now and whenever you decide, if you do decide to actually sell your property. So here are some of the typical reasons that people sell in the spring. Green grass, tulips popping up, leaves on the trees, hope the prices will increase, and you can see several more. Now, what's important here is that let's acknowledge these things first. Every one of these things is true, right? We want more to move out after school finishes for some people, more convenient for people to view your home and you're not out in the snow. You know, if you're doing it at a different time of year or in the winter or thinking about doing it in the winter, spring is much nicer to do it in. Believe spring is best time to sell due to more buyers. Like, all of these have elements of truth and some are very true. However, the real question is, what are the pros and cons? Those are all pros. Those are wonderful. On the pro side of things, there's less stress, less rushing around to get things done because you have a longer runway. I mean, we're not at the spring yet, so this allows a longer runway to prepare. It's better weather. We just spoke about that. Who wants to be, freezing cold in your car while people are walking through your house? Typically, you can get a longer closing and more time to prepare. So, on the con side, we have, and I know this might sound odd, right? We have more competition. There will be. Everybody generally thinks, if you look at a chart in terms of when properties are being listed, Zach, do you not find that most properties, if there was a condensed period of time where there was a spike of new listings, that it actually happens in the spring versus other times of year?
Yeah, when you have your typical market, which this year seems like we're getting back to that finally, in your typical market, that late March through early May is typically when you have that big boost in listings, which therefore creates more competition, as the first point says there. So it coincides with all the positives that you're talking about on the pro side. Like you said, that's something that most people think. So the collective mind is all thinking together and they're doing the same thing, which leads to this boom in listings when the buyer pool isn't really changing.
Therein lies the reason sometimes, thank you for that it's a longer runway, longer time to sell. Because if a buyer, think about it this way. If you are hungry for a candy bar, right? Chocolate bar. You go into the store, there are 2 chocolate bars. Pretty simple decision to make. I want this one or that one, or maybe I want both. But in this case, when it comes to let's go one step further. If you have 25 different chocolate bars, do you think you'll make a decision as quickly if in fact you're not committed to have one type of chocolate bar? Well, it's a rhetorical question. Of course it's going to take you longer. So that's what happens with buyers in the real estate market as well. Zach, I'm sure you found it. When things were going crazy through COVID and all that boomy stuff, what happened? I mean, you had to make a split decision, right? A buyer had to make a split decision. But now, when there are, let's say, 10 or 15 properties, are they going to make a split decision on the first one they see?
Yeah, no, there's definitely, when you have options, you then have the opportunity to be more selective. And if you don't get something at what you think is the right value, you say, oh, whatever, I'll go to the next one because there's X many more for me to choose from. And, I like this one, but I also like others. So it's not a big deal if this one slips through my fingers.
Well, that's right. And I think the underlying premise there is that there is something called FOMO, right? Fear of missing out and fear of loss. And when you have limited supply and a multitude of buyers, guess what happens? That gets invoked psychologically, and people then behave in accordance to that emotional driver. However, if there's tons, it's like, I remember, people would come up in terrible weather and come up that night when a property got listed, and There were cars lined up and down the road. I don't know. Do you remember that, man? It was
Oh yeah.
crazy, right? And
Yeah.
then you'd wait your time. You'd only be allowed 15-minute intervals to get in. And then you'd have to make a decision to go 150 grand over asking, like it was nuts.
Against 20 offers, no less.
Against 20 offers, no less. So in a changed climate, which is, at the time of this recording of this webinar, things are different. People have many more houses to choose from. So therefore, if they can't make it up this weekend, no big deal. They'll make it up next weekend. And if that property is gone that they were hoping to see, they're not messed up and all freaked out. What'll they do? Well, what do they say more than do? We'll wait for the next one. I guess what do they say? It wasn't meant to be.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Now, I go by that in life for a lot of things, but sometimes you got to make an effort. So if you miss an opportunity, it wasn't necessarily because it wasn't meant to be. Maybe it wasn't because they didn't try, right? There's two sides to that coin. So not to spend too much more time on this particular topic, but lower sale price is a byproduct of everything we're talking about. Unless you have some unique special home and they can't find it anywhere else, they being the buyers, then you may be able to have a stronger sale price. But if we have a massive influx, particularly in subdivision type homes, you're gonna and have a lot of competition, you could have softening prices. Not guaranteed that that'll happen, but it's something you need to be mindful of and track all the way along. Now, potentially higher rates, that depends on the year, right? If you have stable interest rates, then not a big deal. If you have rates that are suspect to go up or potentially already going up, incrementally or aggressively, you got to be careful regardless. You can't wait too long because time is not your friend, it's your foe. However, if rates are going down, that particular con does not apply in that situation. So we've gone on a little bit, with our introduction here, but I think it's important to state, who are we and why take our advice? I mean, we could be a couple of guys that just got our license and don't know what the heck we're talking about, but the reality is that's not the case. We have a team here of, it's a good sized team, and we have different market sectors within the business or business sectors managed. We have marketing, we have programming, we have agents, we have admin, we have social media people on our team, and everybody is very committed to helping our clients. I started personally in 1984, and so some water's under the bridge. We just talked about an administrative support. We have marketing department, programmer, and IT person to help leverage technology so that it can help our clients. We've serviced Barrie and surrounding areas since 1990, and I personally have helped over 2,000 families buy and sell their home, which speaks to it. I'm not saying that to impress you. I'm saying it to impress upon you that we have the experience to navigate most, if not all, circumstances in a real estate transaction and the market. I've been now involved in this is the fourth market correction, and there are indicators and signs that being through them in the past are more easily spot than somebody who's a year or two has never seen a shifted market or a down market. So just keep that in mind when you're making your decisions about who you want to help you. Make sure that the experience is there, given the marketplace that you're in. So let's move right into it. Preparing for listing your home for sale. We're going to talk categorically about things that you need to do, things that we do for our clients, and you'll be able to see this unfold as very important and necessary steps in order to optimize your price. This is basic stuff, right? But let's go over it anyhow. Decluttering. Decluttering is different than staging. A lot of people kind of intertwine those two and mix those up, but decluttering to the point where you don't have things looking barren, because that has no warmth to it. Some people put everything on their shelves and throw it into a box or into a storage unit or whatever. but it's not the right decision in my opinion because it lacks warmth, it feels very sterile, etc.
So
Clean.
yeah, just on that note, a comment I get a lot of the time when you go into these houses that have gone a little bit too far with their decluttering is the buyers will say it doesn't feel like a home, it doesn't feel lived in. So people want that, like you said, that warmth, that they can, if they can see that a family has lived here, then they can picture their family living there, right? If it feels like an office or something where there's just nothing anywhere, it's just clean and tidy, but there's no you know, things that make you feel like you're in someone's house, it's hard for them at times to make that connection to themselves.
Man, that is so true, so true. And everybody has a subjective perspective, right? So how you declutter and how I declutter might be completely different. And to us, we've done the right thing. But like everything, there is the best practice. And if you're not exposed to what the best practice is, you'll do it how you want. You may be able to hit, check that box as best practice, but there's a chance that you may not. So having somebody with the eye, with the knowledge, with the experience, being able to help you, and that's why, and we'll get into this a little bit later, having somebody come through as a walkthrough with the only intention being guiding you and giving you a checklist of things that will help optimize your sale, not only the speed of sale, but the price you get. The more engaged people are in anything, the more emotionally connected and attached they are, the more they're going to lean in. The more they lean in, the greater the price and the quicker the sale. So, and in terms of clean, I'm sure you've seen people, they have a definition of clean that, we may not. And it's important, once again, to set a standard that will appeal to the marketplace. And we live with our environment every day. So sometimes we're not consciously aware of the thing that, we're okay with. We're not consciously aware how that's going to affect somebody else coming in.
For sure. And like another thing that we often say to our clients is when you're getting your house prepared to list, you want to look at it with a buyer's eye. If you were coming through the house and looking at your house as a potential buyer, they keep a sharp eye out. Like if you had to purchase this for X amount of dollars, like whatever, $800,000 or whatever the amount is that you're hoping to get, what would you be noticing? Because some people will, do a good clean, but then maybe they haven't done the baseboards or the windowsills and like these nooks and crannies that are noticeable for people who are spending, making the biggest purchase of their lives in most cases. They obviously have a very keen eye and are looking at whichever home they're potentially buying very, very closely.
Great point. Great point. And, when we move into, we talked about decluttering and staging. Some people have a natural ability to stage their own home without thinking they're staging their home. Their colors are perfect. Their furniture is perfect. Everything just comes together. Other people don't necessarily have that skill or talent or need to have that as a visual, part of their world, their environment. Some people prefer comfy, cozy, casual, which doesn't necessarily translate to a well-staged home. So once again, having somebody walk through, and what we do for our clients, we have stagers, but we also can save the time of a stager and the cost associated with staging by coming through. I mean, when you've been through thousands and thousands of homes and you can see thousands of clients over the years react to certain things, I think we can avoid having an actual stager come in 90% of the cases. So the experience there can aid as well. But you don't want to overstage to make people feel uncomfortable walking around. Again, there is a balance that needs to be struck. And that balance is people need to be to feel invited and welcomed and warm and not afraid to walk through the home or afraid to sit down on a couch. Not that we encourage people to sit on your couch, but sometimes they do. When they do that, that's a great sign that they're really leaning into the property, right? But you don't want to have that uncomfortable feeling. And, let's talk last thing here, repairs. This is also important, but there is a fine line as to how, and we'll discuss this in a little more detail shortly. But repairs, you can go too far in some cases, and in other cases, not far enough. I can't tell you over the years how many times I've heard, and in some cases it needs to be, whether it's a financial constraint, a timing constraint, something that's preventing people from doing some of the things that really should be done to put your best foot forward out there. They say, and it's almost like people went to school to make the same statement. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll leave it to them. If it's a painting or something, no, they'll probably come in and change the paint anyhow. Well, that's not really true, right, Zach? I mean, there are a lot of people who present their homes in a way that people fall in love with, and they won't change a darn thing. In fact, we've seen people want to buy the furniture and art and all the kind of stuff because they love it so much. They want that to be the environment they walk into.
And a secondary point to that, you're absolutely right. But even if you believe that somebody is going to come in and they're going to make their own decorating choices and change things up, it's still in your best interest to present the home in the best way you can, right? So even if someone is going to make those changes, you still, if you have if the colors in your house are a little bit darker and aren't, giving that nice, natural light accepting kind of colors, right? It might make it I think it does make sense to make color choices that you think will be most receptive to the buying population, because it's not too super expensive, not super time consuming, and it can really make a big difference, even if they will make their own choices afterwards.
Very well said, man. And I think what can be capsulized here is we all look at life and live a life through a subjective lens. I've seen colors that I go, first of all, why would somebody choose that? Second of all, why would somebody actually create that in like a paint color factory thing? Like, why would you? But they do, they love it, they lean into it, but it's not going to be for everybody, and it can repel some people. And if it repels people and you want those people to buy from you at a top price, but you're not considering what it is that they need, you're only displaying what you need, there can be a disconnect, and it could affect the saleability and the amount of money that you actually get for your property. I'm sure you've seen that as well, right, man?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, 100%.
All right, so let's move on. So one of the things, we kind of have alluded to this in our last slide there, but in order to do what we're talking about, have people come through, what we do for our clients is we actually do a walkthrough of their home. And at the end, we'll leave staging tips, minor item issues that we think should be done, major items, and we're going to talk in more depth about that, because this can be a very interesting point that people have to make a big decision on. List of what not to do. That is important.
And sometimes it's more important to know what not to do than what it is to what to do, right?
Exactly, man, because there are some things that don't give a return on investment. Mm-hmm. So if you want to do something that doesn't pay you for doing it, and it's not going to affect the desirability, and we'll get into this in a minute, of the buyer, just because you want to do it, as long as you're willing to accept the fact that that improvement may not give you a return on your investment and it's going to take time to do, go ahead. But to me, why? And so pre-home inspection as well, we want to make sure, and we'll get into this in a little bit, we want to make sure that we know what the home's latent issues might be, things that aren't visible and easily seen, like, let's say, moisture behind drywall, let's say mold in an attic. I mean, some of these things have ruined deals, and if you don't know about them because you're not looking for them and you haven't been in those areas, guess what can happen? The deal can have a catastrophic fail at that point in time. So we talk about the issue of a pre-home inspection, and we share copies of previous pre-home inspections so that our clients are able to see what it is that they would be investing in to confirm that it's something that they want to do. Not everybody does it, but it's a strong recommendation. Now, continuing on, taking notes, discussing the fringe items, giving a list of recommendations, discuss the probable costs and ROI, right? This is super important. We have basically over the years identified things that can be considered to be gifts to the buyer. And what I mean by that is you do an improvement that doesn't change the value. It was an expense to you, and the buyer gets it as a bonus. So do you want to do that? Yeah, maybe. But the question is why? Provide a list of contractors if necessary. So this is all a byproduct of walkthrough of the home to kind of set the compass for what needs to be done from that point to whenever you choose to put your property on the market. Zach, you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's very important to have these discussions to understand, because there are people when you start talking to them about, hey, this should be done and this might be a good idea to get this done as well, and you start talking and the calculator's going, right? Like they're just like, oh my gosh, I guess we're spending so much money. So just having somebody who has gone through it as many times as we have and can at least give you ballpark figures, and then we have the contacts to back it up, to give you the exact dollar figures, and we've got a trusted community of contractors that we've worked with over the years. Like Neil said at the starting, he's been doing this for pretty much 4 decades, and I've been doing it for over 10 now. So we've developed quite a list of people who are trustworthy within these realms, and we've worked with them enough that they're pretty readily available when we ask them to come and give an estimate and help you understand what you're dealing with,
and in a timely manner. Because sometimes, as you know, if you need something right away and it's a small job, contractors won't likely come out because it's not worth their time. The relationships that we've formed with these contractors over the years, small job or big job, because we provide them so much business over time, they will come out for a small job because they know they'll continue to further the relationship and do their part as well. We can't always have big jobs, right? So that's a good piece. Zach, earlier on you said that I was 4 decades and you said you were 10, but that's not 10 decades, is it?
No, over 10 years. Yeah. I don't age quite that gracefully.
I hear you, buddy. I hear you. All right, let's go. Getting a little bit deeper into the staging side of things, less is more. Too little is barren and unwelcoming. Don't keep things on your counters, and we'll talk about that a little more here. And continuously wear your marketing hat. These are all cornerstones of the staging process. Less is more, but not barren. Like I've seen people, when I walk into their homes, they're living there, and there is literally nothing on the countertop. There's nothing on any shelves. There's nothing on a table. There's nothing on end tables. They've taken off family pictures, and I mean, it's like you're walking into a vacant home of people. There is no warmth, and that has an adverse effect. I shouldn't say adverse, but it causes pause, right? What do people live here? Sometimes you got to open up the fridge to see if somebody lives there, and that's not the warmth that we're hoping for. People want warmth, generally speaking. And don't keep things on your counters. Well, that's not wholly so. We have a formula as to what needs to go where, how many pieces, depending on the size of the surface. And it's not just counters. It's on shelves, it's on curio cabinets, it's on dressers. Any surface that you would normally, store stuff, we want to be very, very mindful of how many things are actually left on those surfaces. Once again, presentation matters. And continuously wear your marketing hat. Zach talked about it earlier. You have to always be on the lookout for, is that towel on the ground, or laundry in the corner, or the kitty litter. I was in a house the other day that for convenience, they don't have a a table in their kitchen. They actually have a table in their dining room that they eat at, and the kitchen itself had 2 kitty litter boxes, right? And that's normal to them. And that okay, so it's normal. However, the first thing people who are not cat lovers or who are super clean, in terms of their environment and don't like cooties or whatever the case is, having that in the kitchen can sometimes be, experienced poorly. And if that's the case, that is going to impact desirability, saleability, and how much you get for your home. So you got to always be wearing that hat, asking, would a buyer be impressed with that? Would a buyer be rejected by that? And have the self-auditing process occurring. So there's a lot more to staging, wouldn't you say, man, than just move this item here, have this picture hung there. There's a whole psychology behind what we're doing.
Yeah, the space and how it's laid out, and like you said, how much square footage on the countertops and things that you're dealing with all plays a factor. There's not just like a blanket you could throw on this and just say this applies to everything. It really does depend on your house and kind of how things are situated.
Well said.
And it just makes a big difference if you know what you're doing and you can present it in the best way possible. Because like you said, when it comes to the warmth, if people can picture their things and their life in your house, it makes a huge difference. There are some places where I feel I've shown people, and if it was presented the correct fashion and that they could have pictured their life there, they would have moved forward with it. But because they couldn't, and it felt, like you said, barren, and it wasn't didn't feel like a home to them, they passed on it and didn't think twice about it. So it's definitely, I definitely would stress that it's a key piece of this puzzle.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. All right, so let's jump onto the minor item list. Things like trim, paint, dusting, decluttering, caulking, yard cleanup, carpet cleaning. These are all important things. I don't know, there's a part of the brain known as the reticular activator, and you'll get what I mean. It's actually a part, you could Google it. So what happens is you get a new car, and you really haven't seen that car before on the road. As soon as you get a new car, you flipping will see them everywhere. Pregnant women see pregnant women. You'll see, if you're in a different country and you see a Canadian flag on a backpack through 500 people, you'll pick that up, right? So what we want to make sure that we understand, again, from the psychological standpoint, is that when there are deficiencies in any area, it automatically and unconsciously triggers the mind to look for more of that. So I've seen people have dirty walkways, garbage and recycle stuff at their front door. There's all sorts of greasy kind of looking whatever on the door handle. When you're greeted with that as a buyer and as an agent showing buyers, it automatically, and not consciously, but automatically and unconsciously, has you looking for those things. And when you have that working against you, it's vital. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have a home like that. I'm just saying to you that we need to take things up to a high presentation level without breaking the bank. So if you have trim that needs painting, or you don't look up at your fan often, or your vent covers are like cold air vents have tons of dust in them, or you look in the bathroom and caulking around the tub or the shower or whatever the case is starting to mold as it does over time, or you have stuff over in the corner of the yard and whatever it is, right, man?
Even if like something as simple as like cleaning out your dryer vent from the outside. Just like these little things can, especially if there's multiple of them, can really add up and have a bigger compound effect on somebody. The snowball starts going, right? And now they're wondering like, oh, how much maintenance has this person really been giving their house? And should I be worried about things I can't see? And et cetera, et cetera. And you can just see it start going in their head, like, and going down the wrong path for if you're looking to sell your house. So
Well, yeah, and let's go one step further. If all of these things are appearing, because typically how people do one thing is how they do most things, not everything, but most things. So if there's a lack of maintenance that's visible, and you walk through a home and you got to wipe your feet on the way out, it probably is not going to leave you with a feeling of confidence that they've maintained mechanical things well, AC, furnace, hot water tank, or anything else, plumbing issues. You'll typically find people who have lower standards in terms of when it comes to maintenance and repair. And it's fine if you do, but the reality is we can't pass that on to a potential buyer without it having consequences on how long it'll take for you to sell your home, and furthermore, how much money you're going to get for it, right? If we're not impressing the people that we want to have buy your home, then you can't expect to have top dollar. So major items, let's chit chat about this. So most of the time, minor items are things that we would recommend strongly. Major items, this is a discussion depending on the degree of repair or replacement that's required, but we want to be very, very careful that we don't do major items that are, give you a quick example. So we have a client that we just helped sell a house, and the furnace was on its last legs. The furnace was 23 years old. The life expectancy of that furnace was 18 years old. We had a pre-inspection done. It showed that, and the buyer ended up getting our pre-inspection, but did their own inspection. Came back and said, this is a major concern for us. We actually had a quote done for the replacement of it, and the quote was with the AC and the furnace, it was $12,000. The homeowner got the quote at our request, because sometimes if you have a buyer left to their own imagination or devices, they will over exaggerate the cost to remedy an issue. So what we like to do is we like to recommend that you get quotes on anything that needs to be done. So therefore we contain that, Zach, you've been through it. Have you not been with people who said that something is going to take $50,000 to change this or that? And it's like,
Oh yeah,
where's that number coming from, man?
absolutely. It's it's easy for those numbers to kind of get out of control very quickly if you don't have real estimates from real professionals. Because even if we suggest it to somebody, it's not, they'll take our advice for sure, but it doesn't hit as hard as if you have the letterhead paperwork from a professional saying this is exactly how much it's going to cost, right? That when you have that readily available, and people, instead of, there are some people who are like, oh yeah, we won't do that, maybe they won't be bothered by it and they won't think about it. It's not going to be a concern for them. But I think it's better to risk that not happening and have yourself prepared for the majority of people that are going to want that professionalism, right?
Yeah, 100%. So to finish that story, so we had a $12,000 quote. The home inspector for the buyer ended up coming back and acknowledging that the furnace and AC were older than its life expectancy, which means that the buyer is likely going to have a cost sooner than later associated with the replacement. And the things that were wrong with it, like there were bearings in the motor for the furnace and stuff like that, and it's at the end of its life, really. So replacement was important, or would be the likely remedy. What we ended up negotiating was a $5,000 price adjustment. So imagine now that our client went ahead because they knew that furnace was going to be problematic, and paid $12,000 for the furnace and AC when we negotiated less than half of that off. So again, there are things that may or may not be required. If we get a flooring or driveway or roof or whatever the case is, we get quotes for that stuff. We can use that quote. First of all, it's important to acknowledge we recognize that the roof needs doing. We recognize that with asphalt shingles or, fiberglass shingles, the cost will be around this. Why? To your point, Zach, we have the piece of paper, and we are willing to negotiate. If it becomes a contentious issue with the buyer, we will negotiate that into the price, as opposed to you coming up with capital, after-tax dollars. See, do you really want to put your capital out, or do you want to use your equity if you're going to pay for something, right? Your equity came with no tax implication. Your cash, you had to pay tax on it to retain the cash. So if you spend $10,000 on your roof, is it really $10,000? No, it's not.
Well, and it's coming out of your day-to-day too, right?
Well, that's exactly it, man. That's exactly it. So not to go down this rabbit hole too much more, but these are things that we want to have intelligent, probing conversations about so that you can make smart decisions and not have your capital wasted, right? So anyway, as we continue, list of what not to do. All right, now there is a caveat with this statement, and I'll get into it in a minute, but kitchens, windows, bathrooms, furnace and AC, we just talked about it. One done versus many left undone, and things that won't give you an ROI. So why not a kitchen? A kitchen, could cost you, well, Dak, you've recently checked into price of kitchens. It can cost you from 15 on a super tight budget to, we've seen 60, 70 grand for kitchens, right? Windows, you're talking about $500 to $750, depending on a normal window. And if you have one window that is messed up, let's say the seal's broken, should you replace that? Yes, you probably should. And we can replace it or have it replaced after the sale, but before closing. There are all sorts of techniques, again, because somebody may come in and go, oh, I'm in the window business. Oh, I have a buddy. Oh, I can manage that. They like everything else about the house, so they'll accept the one window. Bathrooms, again, another time-consuming and highly expensive thing that you're not going to be able to measure your return on investment. Furnace and AC, we just went through that example. Now, what do we mean by one done versus many left undone? I've seen it many times, Zach, I'm sure you have too, where everything is aging, right? The home hasn't really been kept up. Everything is aging. There's some heavy wear and tear. And let's say one element has a high wear and tear. Okay, so let's say a bathroom, the vanity is messed up and the tap's going really slow and the drain's slow. And anyway, I don't have to give more examples here, but you know what I mean. And that's the worst of everything that needs to be done. If you do that one and not the rest of them, the buyers aren't going to give you double thumbs up for doing the one. They're going to hold everything that wasn't done against you. So some things do need to be done, no question. Like if it's one thing that really needs to be done and it's going to kill the desirability, sure, let's talk about it. But that's the important part. Let's talk about it. And things that won't give you an ROI, like a return on investment. What gives ROI? Pot lights, crown molding. People get excited about that stuff. Sometimes countertops and paint colors and decor and the eye candy stuff. But who's going to get excited about, the R value in your insulation being R62? Who?
Yeah.
Right?
The insulation guy.
Well said, man. Well said. Anyway, not to beat a dead horse here, but important to be able to identify why things should not be done and how to remedy it. It's not to say that it won't affect us, that what isn't done, but there could be a greater effect of doing it if more things need to be done and you're not doing that stuff.
Just to summarize this, a way I like to look at it is it's consistency, right? If there's a level of consistency, good or positive or negative, it needs to follow that. If you have like a sharp house, like looking at this photo we got here on the slide, if your house looks like the house on the left, and then you have like one room that is just in rough shape and needs a revamp, that is a room you should take care of, right? You need to bring that up to the level of the rest of the house, because it's the opposite of what Neil just said. They will hold that against you. Despite what you have done in the rest of the house, they're going to forecast, oh, we're going to need to do this, 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 and this, instead of thinking about, hey, we're moving into a move-in ready house and a beautiful house that's going to be perfect for us. They're like, oh, we got to do this kitchen, right? But like Neil said, if the house has not been updated and it needs lots of maintenance and things of that nature, then it doesn't make sense to update one bathroom or one bedroom or even a kitchen or something like that, because the rest of the house is still going to need work, and they're still going to be penciling in the same amount of money that they would be even if you did the kitchen or not.
Yeah, great points, man. The pre-home inspection, we talked about it, right? Be aware of any unseen issues that can remind you of things that you may have forgotten about. And I said earlier, it may not be that you've forgotten about it, but how often do you go up into your attic, right? How often do you recognize that the vent from your upstairs bathroom, or whichever bathroom vents into the attic itself, has not come off and is depositing warm air that causes mold? That happens more than you realize. And that gets discovered on home inspections. We just did a pre-home inspection on a home that somebody has renovated, and I guess they did their own wiring, but virtually every outlet in the basement had reverse polarity, right? So that means that that's a risk. And there is a fair number of those as well that had no ground wire. So if you now have the eye candy, ooh, nice. I mean, beautiful countertops, really nice presentation, 4-car garage, but you get some kind of a danger thing happening through somebody's home inspection, a buyer's home inspection, and they weren't aware of it. That engagement, that leaning in, will change in an instant. All the things that had them make the decision to buy the home and pay that price gets unwound, and sometimes they just want out of the deal. So for the sake of a few $100s, to have insight as to what a buyer's home inspector might find, so that we can remedy that in advance of putting the house on the market, why wouldn't we? Right? Any thoughts on that, Zach?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. For me, if I was selling my house, to know what I'm dealing with, and I can then make a choice if I want to do it myself beforehand. So people, if there's smaller things that are going to add up and it's not going to be a major ticket item, being able to manage those things before your house hits the market, you can take care of a lot of the ticky-tack things that people would see in their own home inspections, right? That, they may be minor, but they do add up. So it gives you the opportunity to tackle things if you so choose, right? So it just gives you more knowledge about what the situation is going into it, and then also gives you an opportunity to talk strategy beforehand.
Yeah. What comes to my mind is I love the term lunch bag letdown. If you as a buyer, or if a buyer comes through a home and they love it, right? And it's sort of like imagining, oh, I'm going to have this for lunch, I'm going to have that for lunch. And then you open up the bag and you go, oh man, a dry, stale tuna sandwich with wilted lettuce. Like, this is not what I was hoping for, right? And essentially that is what we're trying to avoid. You'll see down here, preemptively manage potential buyer responses. Well, what does that mean? That ultimately means that if we know that there is reverse polarity in your plugs, we know that there is no ground connected, we know that you have slow draining, plumbing drains, that you have calcification in the faucet aerator. Wouldn't that be good to know for those minor things to be able to change, so that the buyer never experiences that and then has to consider after their home inspection what they want to do? Because let's face it, there are a few outcomes from a home inspection. If a buyer does it without knowing the deficiencies in advance, they can either accept things as they are, go through with the deal. B, they can reject it completely given the outcome. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes I had a situation recently where the buyer, was our client, said no to a home because it had aluminum wiring, notwithstanding the remedy, which is what they call pigtailing, whole other topic, but where you put copper onto, through a certain process onto the aluminum wiring to have now a copper connection at the socket or the light switch or whatever. She couldn't get away from the fact that it had aluminum wiring, and that type of wiring has been known to be risky at some point in time. So when people discover and it becomes a surprise, like the lunch bag letdown, you will find them back off completely. The third thing that people will do is say, I'll continue buying the home, but I want so much off and I'll manage the deficiencies, right? Which is where that over exaggeration of the costs may come in, whereby somebody says, oh, I want to remove the mold from around the vent from the bathroom that's exhausting into the attic, and they say, I want 10 grand off. Well, it could be a $400 fix. So how do you unwind from that? How we unwind from it in advance is getting a quote, because we did a pre-home inspection that has the contractor's quote with their letterhead saying it's a $400 or $500 fix. It limits the overall situation. And then the last one is that they say, you homeowner, fix the issue at your expense and we'll be satisfied with that. We'll come in and do another inspection to make sure what you did works. So you can see the value in having a pre-home inspection. Some people who take great care of their homes, and it's a calculated risk, don't need to do and want to do a pre-home inspection, and we respect that. This is merely a recommendation, and a strong one, because there are things even in a well-maintained home that you may not know about that are happening behind walls, right? So, any comments, Zach, before we roll on?
No, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. Again, just to double down on what you said, it's merely a suggestion, not something you by all means have to do, but we have used it time and time again, and it's been very successful when we've used it, and our clients have been appreciative of this strategy in the past.
For sure. All right, on to the next here. Preparing for the sale. Now, there's a difference between what you need to do and, in our case, what we do for our clients. So we have checklists that we provide our clients, right? Exterior, interior, kitchen, bedrooms, dining. Everything is checklist so that it becomes easy for you to follow. I mean, again, if you don't have a checklist, you could hit some things and not others. What we want you to do, particularly if you have a bit of a runway in order to sell your home, is to take this checklist and run through it so that once it's marked done, we know we're one step closer to getting your home market ready. We furthermore do things, well, let me just kind of go over this real quick here. You'll see over here, list of homeowner activities, right? So you'll get these lists. This is just an expanded version of what we summarize there. Next thing as well is what we do for our clients to make sure that you're always in the know. So you'll see here, the Bayley-Hay Team, we have our own list of things that when in concert, we continue to move towards the finish line together. And at the end of the day, you have a very marketable property, because not everything will be done, but everything that you can do will be done. So as you can tell, we love information. We believe no information and winging it, unfortunately, produces no success. And we have seen this time and time again. There are best practices, there are best ways to do things, and some people, even though that they're told, they don't care, and they're just rolling the dice as to whether or not they succeed. And most of the time, not just our advice, but advice from any professional, If you don't follow the advice of somebody who's gone before you that has done it well and has a system, then sometimes it can turn against the person. And on the contrary, we believe when you know information, you will experience or know success. And that's what we're essentially demonstrating here is that, and again, kudos to you for being here, because this stage of the entire selling process might be considered the most important, which is gathering information and best practices so that you can succeed in your endeavor. I'm going to switch now into what more of a statistical side of things. I don't know if you, I'm sure you do. I shouldn't say I don't know if you'd remember, but remember when we saw interest rates under 2%? Like I saw 1.5 or 1.4, I believe, as the lowest interest rate during that time between 2019 and 2022. It was like free money, right, Zach? I mean, how many times in history, have rates been that low? Like almost never.
Yeah, and it was pretty incredible to think about, considering where we're at now.
Right. So what happens is, and this is a really important thing, not that I'm trying to be an economics teacher here, but if the constant is people's income and their capacity to pay for debt, if interest rates go down, they can afford with the same money to pay or borrow more, right? So if house prices go up, it's in proportion to the affordability of those prices going up, which means that if the rates come down, it allows house prices to go up. Pretty simple and basic example. But what happened in March of 2022, it was actually February, I know we've talked about this, but beginning of March, we saw interest rates start to rise. And as a result of that, buyers that didn't change their income, right? If you make so much, you make so much. Once the interest rates start to increase, house prices have to drop because the cost of borrowing has gone up. And this is where we have this this tethered situation. And why are we talking about this? Because at the end of the day, we have to be mindful of where we are in the marketplace. Now, fortunate or unfortunate, I've been through 3 previous market corrections. This is my 4th. Zach, I think you're first, I believe. I'm not sure, or maybe second.
Second, yeah.
Yeah, second. This is typically what happens. So there is a peak. So this peak is where we just talked about. It would have been February of 2022. And once that peak has hit, that crescendo has occurred, there is a decline. And typically that decline, by our observation anyhow, is plus or minus 3 years. But when you think about where we are right now, if that happened in, we don't need to do the math, but we're close to that 3-year period. So as you can see down here to here, it isn't as steep a climb, nor do we have as far to go. I personally believe, given all the key indicators that we're observing, that we're probably right about here. So in some price points, very important distinction, I still think that there is some ways to go with values dropping. In other price points, I think it has hit stabilization. In fact, you kind of see some maybe slight working up in values. Now that happens based on demographics, right? If you live in an area where we are, our average price is somewhere around $750-ish. Zach, would that be about accurate?
Yeah. For if you're looking at Barrie as the hub, detached home in Barrie, in between 750, 775.
Okay.
On average, obviously.
On average, right? So that marketplace is going to be more buoyant. That there's going to be more activity. There are more people that are able to afford that price point. But let's say you go to a $2 million home. Do you think you have the same number of buyers? Well, the answer is no. And if you don't have the same number of buyers and you have a strong inventory, what will likely happen? Supply and demand, basic economic principle, you'll see values come down. So we have to be mindful which market sector we're analyzing, because we can't, and we'll talk about this in a bit, we can't always just talk about the market, because there are market sectors that behave and perform differently that you have to plug into from an expectation standpoint and a strategy standpoint. So what happens after this decline is that you come into a stabilization period. So the market and the government and Bank of Canada will have a lot to do with this. If they stabilize the rates and even decrease them a little bit, they can't decrease them too much because that could spike inflation, which is exactly what they're trying to avoid. But the stabilization period, typically in our observation in the last 3 market corrections, is here plus or minus 3 years. So if you're in the last decline or even stabilizing in value and you're thinking, oh, next spring, maybe I'll do this, or next fall, maybe I'll do that in terms of selling or moving or whatever, you have to be mindful, will the value of your property remain consistent with what it is today, or is there a chance it will go down or it will go up? And that should help you at the end of this assessment determine whether it makes sense to pull the trigger and do it now or whenever, or you can wait, because actually waiting might serve you. And then the last part of this, of course, is that you have a 3-year incline to come back to that peak point. Typically when that occurs, you will then have incremental, providing there are no other outside influences, like immigration can affect things, and wars on the other side and whatnot can affect things. But if we're in a normalized market, most of the time you can anticipate anywhere between a 3 and a 5% appreciation in real estate values annually. So this is a really important piece. We don't spend a ton of time on it because we know exactly what we're looking for in each market sector. We share that with our clients to make sure that they're well educated and informed, so that they can make an intelligent decision at that point as to when they do it, or if they do it at all. And I say it, meaning make a move. So you've probably heard things like, how much inventory is there in any given market, right? Somebody will say, I hear it on the news all the time, oh, there's 3 months of inventory. Well, most of the time they don't give you context and help you understand what that means. And we're going to share with you shortly what that means, how you actually determine how many months of inventory. But let's say for right now, we're going to talk about 3 types of markets. You have the seller's market, you have the stable market, and you have a buyer's market. Seller's market, when things were going crazy through COVID, there was less than 1 month supply. So the trajectory of value was very steep. Prices were going up literally. Even if you overpriced your property in that market, the market would catch up to your ridiculous expectation at some point. You remember that, man? It was just absolutely nuts. So, oh, that house is taking longer than 5 days to sell. I wonder what's wrong with it. It's like, what kind of thing is going on in our heads to come to that conclusion? But the reality is that the market caught up to people's hopes and dreams in that climate. As you can see, though, if you have 2 months of inventory, more supply for the buyer to choose from. 3 months supply, the trajectory of value starts to change. When you come to 4 to 5 months supply, values are relatively flat. That's kind of like where some market sectors are right now. But if you have more than 5 months, call it, you start to see a decline in values. So when we do this calculation, we apply this formula in your market sector, we'll be able to quickly tell you what the trajectory of your value might be if the key indicators continue on as they are. And this is a very, very important piece of the equation. So here is the formula at the end of the day. I'll make it simple. We have to look at how many houses are for sale at the time of analysis. We have to look at the average over the past 3 months, the average number of properties selling per month. and then we take the standing inventory divided by the average number of properties selling per month, which gives us our months of supply. Zach, any thoughts?
No, it's laid out pretty nicely there and easy to understand. And it's a good way, a quick way of just diagnosing your sector of the market, right?
Yeah, 100%. With real estate, there is a duality. There is a art and a science that needs to be melded together in order to navigate particularly uncharted waters. Like crazy markets, who cares? You just throw it on and the market does its thing. But in complicated markets, you need to have these understandings, these frameworks, these tools, these processes to plug into in order to guide your client well. And everybody has to start somewhere, but somebody who is a year or two or even maybe even 10 may not understand these nuances. So we got to be super careful that we don't dismiss this kind of information. And I know a lot of people may not know what they don't know and what they should know from being a homeowner. And this is where you have to seek, again, back to applauding you here, have to seek the advice of professionals who understand it so that you can be well informed to make your decisions. So this is just another visual representation of the let's just say inventory. As inventory increases, home prices decrease, because what remains typically stable are the number of buyers in the market. Unlike the spring, if you will, you don't have an influx typically of home buyers at any given time. That remains pretty constant. So your inventory then, and what influences the inventory helps or determines rather what the prices are going to do. So going back into what we will help you with, and that's providing, of course, we work together, but at the end of the day, this is what we end up helping our clients do and understand. And as mentioned before, we have been in this business. You see all these souls, but I want to just make it very, very clear. We help people sell their homes. It would be better if we had the faces of all of our clients here to display that, but this is the byproduct of helping people move on to the next phase of their lives. This isn't just about a transactional situation. That's why we've taken the time as well to orchestrate this presentation, to educate and inform and demonstrate that we are here to help. We're here to help, not just sell houses, but help you move on to the next phase of your life by selling your house, right? So once again, 40 plus years of experience helping over 2,000 families buy and sell their homes. It's important to know the difference between opinions and advice. As we've heard many, many times, opinions are like blank, everybody's got one. But advice comes from experience. Opinions don't come from experience. Therein lies the difference between those two. So what do? We do an in-depth and timely market research for our clients. We just do, as demonstrated already. We make sure that our clients aren't overpaying when they purchase a property with us. We talk about the number of times other homes have been relisted, particularly if you're a buyer. Like, think about it. Is there not some evidence of maybe a good deal if people, and the level of motivation people have, if you continue to see them reduce their price over and over and over again? That tells you about motivation. This is where we're able to actually read between the lines of somebody's behavior to help us navigate the negotiation, where we're going to start, what does this mean, etc., etc. List to sale price ratio of similar properties. We want to make sure, whether you're buying or you're selling, that where properties are listed at, there is an anticipated 2 or 3 or 8% reduction on that type of property from the list price. That kind of information aids you. If you see somebody and you do the research and we understand what the prices should be of a home that you're going to buy, and we see this person is 30 grand higher than that, we know that there's an opportunity, because nobody else can be flocking to it as if, oh man, this is going to fly off the shelf because it's deemed to be an overpriced listing. What we're going to be able to do is to show you what's going on, show you the data, and give yourself a strategy so that we can get that property, providing the seller is willing, get that property at a really good price compared to what they're asking. How many other homes are competing for the buyer's attention? This kind of swings back to you. If we're in a market sector that has very few properties that we're competing against, we may want to have that price a little bit top heavy to test, because we're not being influenced by our value is not being influenced by other competitors. But if it's the reverse, we want to make sure that we understand if we're putting our price at the same as everybody else, that we probably have a very long runway before our property gets sold and or even shown. So this information allows you to be tactical with your decisions. How long those properties have been on the market. Days on market is important, but here's a trick. Sometimes you go on MLS and you'll see, 14 days on the market. You know what? That's this time. Zach, why don't you explain the difference between DOM and CDOM?
Yeah, I agree. This is a very important piece of the puzzle, because a normal tactic in strategy in real estate now is when you do a price reduction, you take the listing off and you put it back on so it will appear as a new listing. However, on our side of things, there is a category that you can sort by that allows you to see the total amount of days the listing has been on during its current cycle. So there's sometimes, like, there was a house going back a year or two ago that perfect example of this. They listed in the early summer at 1.1. They've reduced, I think it was 5 or 6 times, and then they ended up selling in the late winter, like February-ish, and it ended up selling for like $850, in around that mark. So so when you looked at the final days on market, it was like 20, but the actual total amount was more like 200. So it's an important distinction for sure.
Without question, because anyway, we can get into more micro detail. Don't want to make this too long, but each of these points are a silo on their own and can be tremendous from the standpoint of information helping you make intelligent decisions. The next one here, research how many months of inventory exists and how that may impact your saleability and price. We talked about that at length, but it also helps us understand how picky and choosy you can be and how good of a deal you can get when buying if you have a high inventory price point that you're looking at. Conversely, if it's a low inventory price point, you got to be careful because those values may be going up. So the longer you delay in terms of purchasing, you could actually be devaluing your dollar because prices are going up. So this data, very, very important, as I hope, or we hope, that you can see. So you need to be kept up to date about the market dynamics and the changes in your home's value. So let's assume that you think that you want to list your home in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now. You have to be very mindful about what the value based on months of inventory and the corresponding trajectory of value that we talked about earlier, what's going on. So looking at the market as a whole can be very misleading. We talked about that. Market sector dynamics. Each price sector behaves differently and affects pricing and timing. If you have a home that's escalating in value and you want to buy a home that is coming down in value, let's say you're going from an $800,000 home to a $1.5 million home, that's not an uncommon situation. You may want to sell your home and have a long closing so that you can watch whatever it is you're buying, and as that continues to decrease in value, you can create a difference in the gap to your advantage or to your favor. So understanding market dynamics depending on the price is very, very important. Where does your property fit in the current market landscape? Are you one that's hyperactive, or is it more lethargic? Customized strategy development. Decide on a strategy tailored to your specific market sector. I'm just reiterating now, this is really, really important to understand where you sit in the market and what the dynamics are of that market sector. And so therefore, if you think about this again, if you're in a position, right, what's my current price versus probable price in the future? We talked about in the very beginning. If we realize that the market value is going to go up from where you are, there is no rush to get your property sold, listed. But if there's a probability that market values will go down, that would be an indicator, in my opinion, that you should list sooner than later. And if it's a stable market, it really doesn't matter. You do it whenever is convenient for you. But this information is important to understand. So here we have the process we use to educate you about the price of your home and what the market dynamics are and how it may affect you. We analyze list prices, number of times on the market, which Zach spoke of, days on the market, and that is not only days on the market for the current listing, but all cumulative days on the market. And this is, an example of how we break things down for our clients. We explain to them what properties have sold for. We explain how many days on market. We explain the list to sale price ratio. We look to show what the average price is for that type of property, either that you're selling or that you're buying. The same approach is taken so that you're informed on both sides of the equation. Recommending the best time to list. Spring versus other markets. Well, that's going to depend on a lot of things. If we anticipate a high inventory and a lot of competition, we may choose to decide to sell before the big impact occurs of fresh new inventory. Market analysis influences the ideal time to list. So we're constantly, as you can see, we understand this space very, very well, and we constantly share that information with you. In fact, we have a system that will plot the value of your home on a monthly basis and send you a graph showing you the change in values, so you're constantly aware of it. And the ideal launch date for your home is a byproduct of all of that. Now, of course, if the market says you should list such and such a date, but you're not ready or you can't, life circumstances, well, at least you know the ideal time and you can get as close to that as possible. But it doesn't mean you have to do it. This is information for you to take in and use to help you make good decisions. And adjusting the strategy based on the market conditions. Because sometimes, like we talked about back in 2022, the market shifted in 1 month. It was like a complete and utter halt. So when that happens, you should know about that so you can make very, very quick decisions. Let's move on. What is important here as well, when you have a bit of a runway and you're doing planning and you're strategic, if you will, it's important to get the marketing prepared for you in advance. So what we do when people say, hey, we have a 3-month horizon before we list our property, or 6 months, whatever, we start gathering our assets well in advance and putting everything to the side. No cost whatsoever. We just do this as a courtesy and as part of our service to our clients, so that when you say go, because life circumstances happen. You could have a launch date that gets affected or altered due to life circumstances. So we always do our best to have the assets prepared in advance so that when you say pull the trigger, that's exactly what we do. And as you can see, there's a variety of things that we do from a marketing standpoint. We have a whole booklet that talks about it. And at any point in time that you want to see specifically what we do, whether it's the email campaigns that we do, the videographer, the booklets that we have, the drones, the coming soon process. I mean, it is extensive, because we know we need to get eyeballs on your home, particularly in a market that is not, kind of managing itself, if you will. You have to know what you're doing in the marketing space to get interest, and then you got to be able to understand the response to the marketing. Are we getting good engagement? Are we not? What's that an indicator of? Is it the mindset shifted? Is it that prices have shifted? All of this information we assess, analyze, and share with you on a regular and ongoing basis. As you can tell, information is important for us to share and have available for our clients and even people who haven't committed to us yet. But we have a library of more than 50 videos and reports, whether it's the home buying guide. I mean, you can see it there. Here it is here. We have this. It's wonderful. Like, I mean, it has all sorts of things you could probably see in here. We have checklists. We were talking about checklists earlier. There are all sorts of things. And I think, when you're choosing somebody to represent you, in my opinion, they should be able to provide you at any point in time resources to inform, educate, or remind you of what the best practices are. So over the history of our team and business, we have dedicated ourselves to be information providers, and they're not, heavy consumption pieces. If you even look down here, bottom left, 2 minutes and 32 seconds, right? We talk about offers or contracts or mortgage issues or how to pay off the mortgage quickly, how to make an offer, when to make an offer, what to do about doing that. And they're all short, consumable, to the point videos and reports that we have available for our clients and people who are considering using us. When it comes down to the next sector, we put the house on the market, we market it, we get offers. We have an entire process, right? We talk about knowing your numbers. If you're buying a home and you're a first timer, or we're dealing with first timers, we know exactly what programs and such to plug them into or yourself into. So again, you get an advantage. We talk about preparing the offer from a price standpoint, how long we're going to give the owners to consider, or conversely, somebody presenting an offer to us, we have to consider all of these variables, what the conditions are like. So again, in this silo, we are very well prepared. We talk about negotiations, how we go about that, the steps we can take, what we, in talking to the other agent who maybe is bringing the buyer or the seller, depending on what you're doing, we want to make sure that we can gather as much information, as much intel, so that you are well informed and can make, once again, an intelligent decision. We talk about conditional periods, whether or not we should accept conditions, what type of conditions, the structure of the conditions, all important stuff. So I would say, at this point, if you have questions, you can get them answered, no obligation. You can tell that we are more than willing to share at any point in time details, whether you're just considering us or you want us to help you through the process. We're definitely here, and you can reach out to us a multitude of ways. We actually have here a opportunity, if you want, to schedule an appointment to get with us, or to get your own playbook, if you will, how to prepare your home for selling. We have a wonderful booklet as well that has literally everything we're talking about in, I think it's a 48-page booklet that can walk you through everything. So feel free to reach out and ask for that. I just want to be really clear about something. We're here to help, not hound, right? A lot of agents, a lot of people in the sales business, want what's best for them. We have, which is to sell a house, list a house, all that kind of stuff. We know that'll happen as a byproduct of helping people. So we will send you links by email after, so that you can have easy access to the resources that we have available if you so choose. And we also have, and you'll get this in the email, the opportunity to set or book a time with us to talk about your circumstances. And, here to help, not hound, no pressure. If you just need a resource to talk about your situation with and get some advice and input, this is what this is all about. So I would like to say, and on behalf of Zach and myself, thanks for being here. Tells us once again a lot about who you are, to be able to spend some time, particularly around something as important as moving and selling your home, and getting educated and informed so that you can make the best decisions that you possibly can. And we're here to help every single step of the way. So for now, take good care, and we'll talk soon.